this is something that I've actually been waiting to hear because he's got some new data he's going to be going over. So Tom was on episode 315 of the Southern Outdoorsman podcast. It's been a few years now, so y'all are going to get first-hand looks and be able to ask some questions a little bit later on, specifically on some of these topics. So again, if you want to have a better understanding of sending capabilities and scent distribution, this is going to be an excellent, excellent seminar. So Tom, I'll let you take it away.
Okay, you guys can hear me all right? All right, the way this works, my students always told me I went too fast. So if I'm going too fast, just stop me. If you have a question at any point, just stop, okay? So what we want to hit first is scents. And the first thing in the scent thing is you, as far as leaving your scent in the woods. So, we'll hit it. You have to understand all scents are composed of volatile organic compounds. They're not one single smell. There's dozens of smells that make up any given scent. And the thing to remember about them is these different chemicals are shown to you on the graph. They will be in the same ratio to one another all the time. Whether there's half as much being exuded or twice as much, the ratios never change. That, like I said, that combination of VOCs gives everything its scent signature. Now, the example I always used in class, think of snickerdoodles and cinnamon roll. Think of the ingredients, flour, sugar, butter, cinnamon as being VOCs, okay? When you walk in a house, you can tell if someone's cooking snickerdoodles, or you can tell if someone's cooking cinnamon rolls. Doesn't matter if it's a single batch, double batch, you can tell because of the ratios of those things to one another. So, more on VOCs. Deer and dogs and anything, including yourself, you can't detect a scent unless the molecules are airborne, okay? Unless it's been exuded as a gas. The more dense the source is, the less gets exuded as a gas. So, a gas is the easiest thing to smell, liquids the next easiest, solids get real tough. Now, again, regardless of the amount of scent being emanated, the ratios of the respective VOCs will remain the same. These charts at the left, those are from solid phase micro extraction gas chromatograph. Each one of those is a different person, okay? That's what their scent signature looks like, as it were. The thing with the scent signatures now, I see by the previous charts, each person's scent is unique, okay? It is as unique, forensically speaking, as your fingerprints. So no one else in the world smells like you. This is the thing we run into with canine and tracking dogs, is how does that dog know to track this certain person through this crowd and still find them? That's how. It's that easy for the dog. What else? Okay. Your scent signature, 85% of it is determined by genetics. 10% determined by environment, which is usually your diet, and 5% is determined by personal scent, your soaps, your shampoos. We used to think that was a whole lot more important. It's not, okay? The sources of emanation from you are your breath, your sweat, both from apocrine and eccrine sources. The apocrine are your basic sweat glands. Any place there's body hair, that's an apocrine gland. More scent involved there. Eccrine is thermoregulating. That's when you're sweating and your arms are sweating. Get a little less scent off that, but you still get it. Also, of course, blood, any bodily fluids. Your fingerprints, another one. You have oily fingerprints. And when you touch something, you're leaving that scent. Real simple. We use it a lot in canine to locate evidence, to locate articles. The dog, for instance, my dog, I could take a quarter and throw it out in the field. She will find it. So, this is what we call Schlieren photography. I put that in there because your body, which we're going to hit on here in a minute, your body is warmer than ambient temperature usually, 98.6. So scent coming off of you rises. The Schlieren photography shows that. If you're a nerd and want to Google some, Google Schlieren photography. There's a whole bunch of really cool pictures in there. Okay, your scent band. Like I said, you're warmer than ambient temperature, so your scent rises above you as you're moving or not. It cools and it falls. This is what we call a thermal plume, especially if you're moving. This is very important in canine. You should pay attention to it for your deer hunting too. As you move, that scent that has risen and fallen behind you creates what we call a vortex street, which is what this looks like. And in this case, it's a double pillar thing, so there's basically two vortex streets. And as you go, as you're moving, that scent spreads out behind you. Just think of the wake of a boat. It's the same principle. So it hits the ground behind you and fans out. The other thing to remember is that this is airborne molecules. This is stuff coming off your body. There will be, and we'll cover it here in a minute, there will be some sticking to the vegetation, etc. But for the most part, your personal scent is going to dissipate pretty rapidly. So if you got into your stand an hour ago, you're probably pretty safe. The other thing about you coming and going is the damage that your passing has done to the environment. That will linger longer. We'll hit it, it says more later. We'll get into that in detail. Because you got your personal scent, and then we have your environmental scents. Before we get to environmental scents, the basic scent rules. We learned this with tracking dogs. If you are emitting a scent, wait. There's certain rules these airborne molecules follow. They are molecules. They will respond to changes in heat and pressure. The hotter it is, the faster they move and the faster they dissipate. If they get to a cool area, they slow down. Okay? This is 9th grade chemistry. Just remember heat and pressure. Elevation, if the scent is undisturbed by thermals, it will flow downhill. Okay? And it flows at the rate of 14 feet per 1 degree of declination. So what we have run into with tracking dogs, and deer would be no different as far as picking this up. If you are here with a 1 degree declination, then your dog is running the track 14 feet lower. He's parallel to it and he's on it, but it's 14 feet away. If it's 2 degrees, it's 28 feet away. And it gets pretty alarming sometimes when you're running a dog. Because I just saw the guy run on that ridge. The dog is 50 feet below him, but he's parallel. So you're good. Same's going to go for a deer. They're going to smell you at that rate. The wind, of course, the wind will move scent. It'll move that airborne scent that you left. And the rule of thumb for that is it will move it 10 feet per 1 mile an hour wind. So if you, again, same deal. If you have the 3 mile an hour wind, which is almost nothing, your scent wake, as it were, is going to be 30 feet away. Okay? So the deer doesn't have to cross your track in order to hit it. They will be able to smell that. It's 30 feet away. And that goes, exponentially almost. Scent will cling to vegetation. Your scent molecules. You have to think of it this way. Vegetation is pretty much created to trap molecule, specifically CO2. Okay? It's going to trap all the others too. So it will be there. Your scent will remain on vegetation for a little while. It will eventually dissipate, but it's going to be there. Scent also clings to moisture. If you walk in the morning and there's dew on the grass, you're going to leave quite the trail. Okay? Same with him asking me yesterday about water. If you want to walk through a creek, if it's flowing water, it's going to flow to the edges. Your scent's going to flow to the edges and stick for a little while. Because it will cling to moisture and it will cling to the vegetation bank. You're not fooling anybody by walking through the water. Okay? Including deer. Scent will seek out cooler areas. Excuse me. Again, you think back to heat and pressure. If it's cool, I have a little video we might see later. If there's a cool area, the scent will flow into it. If your scent band is going right here, but this over here is in the shade, your scent band is going to look like this. So, your deer are going to pick it up over there. If you're tracking with a dog, the dog will go over there. And when you see it happen, you need to know why. It will be affected by other factors, thermals, of course, any increases in temperature, any convection currents. So all of this stuff, you kind of have to process on the fly. You never know what you're going to run into on a given day. Now, we get to the good stuff. Environmental sense. When plants are damaged, they leak chloroplast. This is damage by you stepping on them, by a deer stepping on them, a cow or anything else. Out of their cells, VOC production increases in the form of primary and secondary biogenic VOC. All right? Primary biogenic VOCs, they last the maximum. That's when you first step on it, and you're just walking through it, you're not really making a mess. Those will last a maximum of 1.07 hours. So, those scents will go away as well in that amount of time. They are immediately attacked, I mean within fractions of a second, by bacteria. And we'll get to bacterial VOCs here in a minute. That's what makes them go away. The bacteria consumes them. Quick, for instance, anybody familiar with the concept of skin rafts? Okay, you know what a skin raft is? You shed epidermal cells all day, every day. You'll shed them at the rate of 500,000 a day. It has been taught for decades in canine and in search and rescue that that's a very important part of the scent signature. Our research shows it's not. Those things, when they get shed, again, in a third of a second, they will be attacked by bacteria. By 10 minutes, they have been consumed. They no longer exist, literally. They are not an important part of the track for you, the deer, or the dog. So, the primary ones are just a little bit of damage you walking through. The secondary biogenic VOCs result from a large amount of vegetative damage. Your guess is good as mine. If you're making a real mess as you're going through, chopping wood, whatever, you're going to get secondary biogenic VOCs. Those will be emitted from that area for up to 8 hours. And they can last as long as 60 days. So that is significant if there's a lot of damage to corn. When you're thinking about this, not just you creating these VOCs, other deer will create them when they walk through. If you're in an area with cattle, they'll create them too. So just bear that in mind. You're not the only one causing this. You may not be the only one that alerts the deer. If you're in an area, for instance, where there's a lot of game or there's cattle, the deer may literally not notice these things happen. So you take that into account as well. The bacterial VCs, which are the important ones, they will take over immediately. They can take as long as the 60 days. to consume. You can run a track that's a week old, and if there's a lot of damage on it, it's viable. So, but again, it's not just you doing it. It's not just the deer. Any other game at all. I don't know if any of you have hunted in Africa, but it's tracked up like you can't believe, and the game does not pay much attention to it at all. These things, these VOCs are used by predators in tracking prey, and presumably by prey animals to help locate food source. Others have found, because they will get into something like this, start chomping on it, create VOC. Other deer will smell that, and here they come. The thing, where did he go? The gentleman asked yesterday, deer, I'll touch on it when we get to the olfaction, but deer generally seem to smell airborne things. They're not too high on tracking on the ground, just because of the way the nares on their nose are shaped. They do it, obviously, they'll track a doe like crazy, but they're a little different. They don't need to do what dogs and wolves and that do. They're set up to disturb whatever molecules are on the ground by their inhale, exhale. They create vortices from their nares, and when they sample the air, they will sample what they just disturbed. They're trying to track something. You know, they're, as I pointed out yesterday, if you're doing like this, okay, that track has more molecules in it than this one did. The dogs are sensitive enough to pick that up. Now deer don't have to sneak up on their dinner. That bunch of soybeans or sorghum is not going anyplace. So they're not set up to do that whole thing. They don't need to. They need to stick with the airborne, because that lets them know when danger's around. Bottom line, for instance, grasses, basic grasses, contain between 200 and 300 VOC. There's a whole bunch going on there. If any of you are familiar with Schutzen, it's a sport dog thing where they do trials. They do it on grassy fields. They just go ballistic if you mow the grass ahead of time. But it just screws up the dogs. The bacterial VOCs are the important ones, because those are the ones that stick around with 60 days. Okay? They begin to consume the dead and dying plant matter immediately and emit an umbrella scent called diaminobutane. That is a wasteful byproduct of them consuming these things. If it's animal matter, which we don't have to worry about with deer, the umbrella term is diaminopentane. The research has shown for every plant or animal VOC produced, every one, like so there are 200 or 300 of them in grass. For every one of them produced, there's between 22 and 82 bacterial VOCs that attack them. So there's a whole lot going on. Yeah, these, like I said, bacterial are the most important, because they take over in a third of a second and continue until they consume the whole biogenic VOC. Again, they're the longest lasting. Those are the ones we need to pay the most attention to. Next, we get right into olfaction and the white-tailed deer. Now, this is going to be a little less scientific, because quite frankly, there's very, very little information out there about it. I dug up what I could. First thing, this is what we know. It is, of course, it's the strongest, most reliable sense that deer have. They may not always trust their eyes, their ears, but they will always trust their nose. If you've hunted them at all, you'll know that. Once in a while, you're out there, you can get away with a little movement. You can get away with just a little noise. But if they hit your scent, you're done. Period. Amundo. Part of the reason for this is the neurological OSNs. Now, OSN is an olfactory sensory neuron. That is the actual neuron that picks up the airborne molecule. The reason is the OSNs are unique in that they attach directly to what they call glomeruli and are on a flat track to the brain. If you know anything about neuroscience at all, picture this is a neuron, this is the dendrites, there's the axon. Well, it picks up a signal, little electrical impulse goes through here, through a synapse to another neuron. Goes through that one to another to another. That's how things get to the brain. In the case of olfaction, that neuron is connected directly to a nerve bundle that goes straight to the brain. That gives it priority over any other signals. That's why it's so important. Because it will get to the brain faster than any other signal. Okay? That's why the deer trust it that much. It goes directly to the brain and hits what we call the amygdala. And the amygdala is part of the limbic system that determines fight or flight. So, it's the fastest thing to get to the brain, fastest thing to determine what are we going to do for a deer, okay? Except being the quickest neurological signal, olfaction receives precedence over any other signals. Again, the deer's not going to trust their eyes or ears as much as their nose. If they're getting mixed signals, they'll go with the nose. A little bit more of what we're able to dig up. The whole olfactory system of the deer is very similar to other large ungulates and indeed most forms of higher mammals. It's a bilateral system. There's two nostrils, there's two systems divided by a septum. Reason for that is basic directional. You get more molecules coming in this side, you know where they're coming from. And the other reason is damage control. If the deer gets hurt and completely ruins this right side, he can still smell better than you can believe, because this side still works. Okay? The system contrasts with many other animals, especially omnivores and carnivores, in that the ethmoturbinates, which are a series of scroll-like bones at the back of the nasal system, that's where the actual scent sampling is done and determined. They are different than they are in omnivores and carnivores. And again, it just boils down to the fact that deer don't have to sneak up on their dinner. They are, the ethmoturbinates, I wish I had included a picture. They're all convoluted and folded rather than scroll-like. The scroll-like things in carnivores allows them to sample faster, sample the airborne molecules faster. Again, you know, the sorghum's not going to run away, so the deer's not in quite that big a hurry to sample it. They do have an increase, the ethmoturbinates, because of all the convoluted, folded up. This stuff is covered by nasal epithelium. So the more of that there is, the more surface area basically is available to sense. Okay? Let's see what else. Also found out that basically speaking, the whole respiratory complex of the olfaction system is a little less complex than that found in carnivores. Same thing there. Carnivore has a whole lot more processing to do quicker. So it's just a little simpler system in a deer. They have approximately the same olfactory epithelium area comparable sized dog. I don't know if you've seen cock shows or anything, but they'll say, well, if you unfold your handkerchief and it's that big, that's how much area is inside a dog's nose. And it's how much is in a deer's nose, too. Okay? The dogs, we know, have 220 million to 300 million OSNs, olfactory sensory neurons. Deer, as far as we can tell, because it hasn't been done, they seem to be on the upper end of that. They're closer to 300. This is a very sensitive nose, as it were. I'm not telling you anything there. Their respiration rate, basic breathing, is like that of a human. It's 3 to 5 hertz, which is cycles per second. Okay? Basically what you and I are doing, very similar to what a dog does. When they go into a sniff mode, it's similar to that of a dog too. Oh, I'm sorry, I gotta back up. It's 0.3 to 0.5 hertz. Okay, so a third of a second for you to take in one breath, or half a second. The sniff rate is similar to that of a dog, and it's 10 times that. It's 5 hertz. When they smell, or think they smell something, or they think they need to smell it, okay? In a dog, it's real easy to equate to people what we call a rapid sniff rate. If you've been around, grandma's foo-foo poodle, you've heard it do that. Well, deer are no different. Now, when you take that into account, the physiological measure of their ability to smell is very conservative. I came up with this because I know basically how to do it. But everybody asks with dogs, and they'll ask with deer, how much better can they smell than a human? And that is the physiological measure. In the case of deer, it is about 600 times better than a human. And that is conservative, that's radically conservative. So, and we come about that with 60 times the OSNs of a human times 10 times the sniff rate. Real simple math. The truth of the matter, like I said, is a great deal more. But you're safe and sound considering it's 600 times better than your nose. Like most higher mammalian forms, they have a vomeronasal organ dedicated to pheromone detection. You guys all seen that. You've been schooled on it. You've seen, like the Fleming response. That will allow airborne molecules to hit their upper lips and their epithelium there. Plus, they'll even lick the air. I'm sure you've seen that. When they lick it, tongue comes in, goes to the roof of the mouth, where the Jacobson organ, or the vomeronasal organ, is located, and that's where that sampling goes. But it's dedicated to pheromones. They don't do that for regular sniffing. Here's what we don't know. The threshold of detection. How little of something can a deer smell? We know what it is with dogs, but we don't know what it is for deer. The dogs can smell down to 1 part per trillion. And the deer probably has a better nose than that. We don't know also how much normal air inspired is sampled for odorants. When they're just walking around being a deer, some of the air that they're taking in breathing is getting sampled. We don't know how much. On a dog, it's 5%. On a deer, we don't know. The research has not been done. It's a little daunting trying to find information on this. We don't know how much of the air inspired during a sniff mode is sampled for odorants. When they go into sniff mode, they're going to be sampling more air in their system than they are just regular walking around. In the case of a dog, the dog being a dog, he samples 5%. When he goes into sniff mode, he samples 13%, and he's bringing in 10 times as much air. So it goes up exponentially. We have got to assume the deer is the same. When they start sniffing, their ability to pick up odor is going to go up exponentially. Okay, we don't know the distances at which odors can be detected by deer. Anecdotal evidence seems to suggest a half mile. I don't have any problem with that. If you've hunted them enough, you probably don't either. Okay? The nares on the deer, which is their nostrils, they appear to be set up for air sampling rather than ground sampling. This again is anecdotal. Nobody's done the research on it. But just looking at them compared to a dog, you can tell. There's more of what we don't know. What odors they are genetically predisposed to recognize as possible food sources, danger, or reproductive opportunities. We are born as humans genetically predisposed to pick up 7 different odors. We may not know what they're about, but we're already geared to pick them up and process them. Dogs are geared to pick up and process hundreds. have to assume the same with deer. If they come to recognize the odor of certain individuals as safe, we don't know what happens. But if you guys, and especially if you're running feeders, you may have noticed this. The guy who comes to fill the feeder is okay. However, anecdotal evidence does support this. I've been in situations a lot where the guy who comes and fills the feeder comes and goes as he pleases, deer crosses trail, you can see it happen. If I walk out there to the feeder and walk back, it's over. They'll hit that trail of mine like a wall. So, something to bear in mind there as well. Masking sense. This is a sticky wicket, but we're going to start with the kinetic molecular theory. I don't know if you had this in chemistry or not. Bonding takes place at the atomic level, not at the molecular level. Period. It doesn't happen at the molecular level. Anyone who claims to have a product with molecular bonding properties, you need to inquire a little bit more about it. Because the deal is, there's a lot of them that do that, and in the form of industrial espionage, they may have paid for research to find out a way to do that, and then not publish the results, so that competition will get a result. So I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but I'm saying probably you need to ask about it a little bit. The other thing about the masking sense, many of us, I'm sure, have had experiences with various products that you really can't explain logically. Deer are supposed to be able to smell this stuff. No, I've seen things happen like this deer directly downwind, and there's nothing. Whereas the next one, 20 minutes later, blows out. I give up. So, like I said, I put down here, if you have faith in a given product and you think it's working for you, keep using it. You know, just simple as that. And the ones that I found when I was digging around, a lot of people whose names you'd recognize in the business, they have a shotgun approach to scent, whereas they will use the soaps, they will use the detergents, and they will use the masking scents and use everything at their, that's available. And they seem to think it helps. If it does, why not? You know, you go with what you think. I was telling Chris, when this stuff first started, we had some stuff called, I'm sure it was rare earth. And we smeared, I had an elk hunter with a bow. Smeared it all over him. It smelled just like fresh dirt. Got behind him and started calling, and in came a cow. And he is laid out prone, and we're sitting back there watching this happen, thinking, she's going to step on him. We're going to see a rodeo, you know. Called her in, she literally stepped over him and kept coming. According to some of the stuff I told you, that doesn't make any sense, but there it is. And I'm sure everybody else has an example too. What else we got? Okay. If all the products in the world worked as advertisers say, you would still find it impossible, and they'll tell you this, to completely cover your scent. For one thing, you'd have to quit breathing, because you emanate a whole lot out of your breath. But you can do what you can do. So go with what you think. Your best bet always, you've heard this constantly, stay downwind. What about ozone? Okay, you guys know how ozone works? The free radicals, all that stuff? All right. Yeah, it comes out as O3, 3 atoms of oxygen. That's unstable. So one of them breaks off, it becomes a free radical. If it contacts another VOC that has oxygen in it, it'll glom onto it. And what it does, it doesn't hide the scent of that, it changes the composition. And the example I got, real simple example, water is H2O. If it picks up that free radical, it becomes H2O2, which is hydrogen peroxide. It's going to smell different. He said it changes the composition. It does not smell like the original thing it was. It's completely different. So, what else we got? It is, when you're in an open air situation like you are up in a tree stand, it would be difficult for all those free radicals to glom onto all your odorants. That said, some of them are going to get them. And what I have found, and basically in canine research, the concepts has some merit for sure in other olfactory applications concerning dogs. There's no reason it doesn't have some merit for deer. So, your choice. But that is one of those things, to a degree it works, because it does change the composition. What else we got? Okay, odors that hide other odors by scrambling a deer's olfactory capability. Here's how this works. This is the olfactory sensory neuron I was telling you about. This is the inside of the deer's nose. Here's the little dendrites. On those dendrites are the receptors per se. When you have introduced something where you want to scramble a deer's nose, what happens is, if it's caustic or if it's irritating, this epithelium that these things are growing through will swell. These protrude by 4 microns, 4/1000ths of an inch. The epithelium will swell to cover them and protect them. But what you got is the deer that's not smelling what you want it to smell, and in fact, it's not smelling anything. The downside to that idea is usually when an animal gets in that situation, where their sense of smell goes bonkers, they remove themselves. Okay? So, but there's your quick neuroscience thing. The cells, the airborne molecules hit these, they transmit a signal up to the glomeruli, straight to the brain. It's what we call fast track. Okay? What else we have? Okay, what you can do. Said all the experts, I even saw a little bit from Mossy Oak, said point blank, you're not going to cover your scent. You can do all you want, and it can help, but you can't hide it completely. Like I said, a lot of the guys will use a multi-pronged approach with the scent-free soaps, detergents, the ozone, or storage in an ozone container, scent sprays, you name it, they try everything to give themselves an edge. 70% or so say it helps. So, again, whatever you believe in, what you should do. Let's see what we got here. Okay, that would be the end of the story, but we're open to questions now.
There you go. I had an older friend of mine that introduced me to deer hunting many, many years ago, and he was always big about drag line, of tying something around your boot, or pulling, especially during the rut, having something with estrus on all that. How do you feel about that? And I guess it applies to some of the points you made. If you think it does, do it, but do you think that can help master scent?
Okay. I don't see a problem with that at all. It makes perfect sense to me. The only downside is that the lure used that you're dragging, how fresh is the urine on it? And is it from the doe in estrus? Because it needs to be fresh. This stuff starts breaking down. But I don't see a downside to that at all, especially if you're not disturbing a whole bunch of stuff on the ground. So I don't know that it's going to keep a deer from crossing your track and getting spooked by it. But there's a distinct possibility you'll have a deer tracking you down, which is kind of what we'd like to have happen, Next.
Another.
This isn't actually a question, it's something to do with what you had. I have tried that and had it work, where you drag something, but what you mentioned earlier where that last step has the most scent in it,
Yeah.
I've actually had them go back to where I started the drag at, because there's more scent. Like as you're dragging, there's less scent on that drag, is what I experienced in that situation. One time I watched the print pick up my track and go the opposite direction.
Okay. See, that makes sense because where you start the drag is where the most scent has been put on. I feel like I'm doing something wrong here. But that makes perfect sense. In the case of a dog tracking a person or an animal, yeah, the latest track has got the most scent because it's the closest. But what you're talking about, when you first freshen up that lure, that's when it's going to have the most scent. So that makes perfect sense. What else we have? Yes, sir.
When you are in an elevation, the 14 feet per 1 degree of declination,
Good.
how much more will or maybe can your scent travel when taking thermals into consideration?
What's that? Oh, taking thermals?
Yes.
That's your guess as good as mine. Do you know how fast the thermals are moving as they go uphill? You know? No, that's a guessing game. So, what is? Okay, 6.9 miles an hour is the maximum thermal speed. And that would, I presume, go for morning thermals and evening thermals both. Okay. So if you got an evening thermal coming downhill, plus the scent naturally rolling downhill, is a double whammy. It'd be a whole lot farther. So I've seen it with dogs more than anything, but I know the guy just ran right down that wall. I saw him, and the dog was over here, paralleling the track. There's no reason to think a deer won't do the same. So, yes, sir.
Got a question up front?
Can they tell the difference between human and deer?
You would sure think so, but I've heard of it too. And I've been in many a box blind where you step out the back and, you know, I had never seen bother. They didn't attract them, but it didn't bother, which is weird. So, I wish I could tell you, really do, but I've heard just what you said. I've even seen guys experimenting by pouring human urine on a decoy. The deer still comes up to it and sniffs it up and they're okay.
I got one more question. Sorry. After 10 miles an hour winds, usually deer kind of like shut it down. Is there a reason for that, or have you found that to be true, or heard about that?
What's that?
Deer aren't very active if winds are over 10 miles an hour.
Yeah, I have found that to be true. And it's basically, one, it does screw up their scent. Another, it covers noise. And that makes them nervous. So it's a double whammy for them. They can't control the scent as well, and they can't hear you coming. And they'll hold up for sure.
We got one back here, Tom.
Okay.
When I'm accessing to get like to a stand location, I'm wondering like if I have different types of terrain. Say I got a field edge, a lot of high stem count area, or a rocky area that I can access from potentially.
Right.
Which one would dissipate ground scent? Of course, the rocks. But
The
like,
rocks will.
what type of habitat would be best to access in for that ground scent to dissipate, since that hangs out the longest?
If you have that option, yeah, the harder the ground, the better. But bear in mind, even hard ground, packed dirt, has microbes in it. When you walk, you're crushing them. So there's going to be scent coming from that. But it is that first primary VOC, so it's going to go away in about an hour. Okay? But yeah, approaching the stand, if you have the luxury of picking your terrain, you know, do it. But the other thing is keep the wind in mind. It doesn't matter how good the terrain is if the wind isn't with you. So, next. Yes, sir.
I got two questions. When you're sitting in a stand, how much odor you're putting off is coming out of your breath compared to the rest of your body?
Probably most of it, because you're no longer moving, you're no longer sweating. So yeah, probably most. So your stand, obviously, has got to be downwind of your food pile or your food plot or whatever. And as you well know, there's a lot of guys that will set up different stands so they can approach the right one during the prevailing winds. So, but yeah, most of your scent's going to come out of your mouth when you're in a stand.
In your dog training, using rubber boots compared to clean leather boots, how much difference is there in the way a dog can trail you?
They don't seem to care because they're hitting the vegetation. And I always wondered about this, and maybe you guys have thought of it. You see these guys wearing rubber boots to go to their stand because of scent control. Now you can pick up a rubber boot and smell it yourself. So I'm like, but I don't know if it's worse for the deer or leather's worse. Like I said, there's a whole bunch in them, stuff we don't know. So, yes sir.
Over there, all right.
To help get out there on a mountain that comes out, at rest, a human's breathing is 183 cubic liters comes out at rest an hour. So that's 183 cubic liters of your scent coming out every hour at rest. Now, if you get exerted, you're going to be huffing and puffing. The gentleman on the urine, it goes to ammonia, and most all breaks down on ammonia. Changing the scent. Okay, would it be feasible for me to be able to modify my scent from a predator to a prey animal by not eating meat and only consuming vegan? Would that be able to change it?
No. No, you're still breathing and you're still an omnivore. That doesn't change. Like I said, your personal scent signature, 85% genetic, at 10% diet. So the 10% takes a back seat to 85. Okay? So.
Is there a rate of ascension or descension for your body temperature as your heat is rising off your body, depending, is there like a graph for ambient air temperature, how fast it's going to rise, or if it's really hot out summer and it's 100 degrees, how fast it's going to fall?
Right. No, that's a real good question, and I don't know the answer. I would imagine with a little digging you can find it, because that makes perfect sense. It's going to rise different at different temperatures, it's going to fall differently. So, very good question, and you have stumped the band.
Do we have any other questions? Over on the other side here.
We'll get you in a second.
I've known a lot of hunters, and I know some that use the soaps, they use the ozone, but also I had a brother-in-law that was a heavy smoker, and he could feel disconnected and he'd hear anybody else.
Okay.
And he didn't use any of that.
Yeah.
So it's cigarettes, right?
That doesn't attract them, but check with him. He watches the wind closer than most guys, guaranteed.
And also he was talking about deer don't smell close to the ground.
Yeah.
And he was talking about the rubber boots.
Yeah.
So upper body is the most important.
I think coming off your body, unless you're causing a lot of vegetation damage, what's coming off your body is more important. But
Then the lower ground.
yeah, but like I said, that's also what dissipates the quickest. So it kind of works in your favor if you have the time. So, hey, just tell me how.
That's what I'm getting feedback. So you'd say that 1,000 yards, or you saying about a half mile, is pretty safe to be not throwing your scent is with wind conditions normal on the deer?
Yes. Yes, indeed. You guys have it a little different than I do. I'm from Montana. We're in open country. Even whitetail hunting is open country. So 1,000 yards is a very feasible thing. To go 1,000 yards through these woods here, that's a tall order. So just be aware of your terrain. But yeah, if it's open enough, yeah, they'll get you at that range. There's no doubt. So. Chris? Okay. All right. You guys are done. Thank you. I appreciate you coming in.
Yeah, appreciate y'all joining us. So we will have a few minutes before we start our next seminar, which the time will start at 12:30. We'll have our next seminar. 12:45. We have our next seminar. So thank y'all for joining us. Go shop around, have a good time, and be back over here at 12:45. Thank y'all so much.